So now we actually are going to start learning some Xhtml. So again, it's the exact same syntax as XML, which we just learned. But one thing you'll notice here is we've got this declaration right at the top of the document. It says doc type, and then it gives us the path to something called a DTD. The DTD is basically a reference to some rules that tell the browser what standard we've complied with. In this case, XHTML1 or 1.0 transitional. So XHTML 1.0 transitional, if you were to go look it up, it tells us that we have to have this HTML tag, and inside HTML we have to have both a head and a body. I think body is actually optional. Likewise, title is optional. So this basic structure is defined. All of the tags that we're allowed to use in this document are explicitly defined. If I use a tag that is not in that DTD, that's not in that standard, the browser most likely will not render that tag. It won't show you it won't show you either what's in there or it won't behave properly depending on the browser. So this is the basic DNA of a web page that we're going to start writing in this class. So you notice here I've got a head, I've got a body. Anything that's in the body is going to display in the browser. If it's in the head, it is not going to display in the browser. This is metadata usually in the head. So for example, title is the title of the page. So if I open up my web browser, here's that page. You can see I've got Hello World, that was in body, and then up here on the in the tab shows the title, Unit 1. Incidentally, where you see this dotted line, usually you'd have a little icon there. That's something else you could put in the head. You could have a link to an icon display in that tab. It's another piece of metadata that could be in that head. So we've got the basic DNA of a web page here. I'm going to start showing you some markup that you can do. So here's an example of some markup. I started with the H1, which was my resume, and then H2 is experience, and then I have an unordered list. Here's list item 1, list item 2, list item 3, and so forth. And then I've got another list that's actually embedded in this list. You can see an example of this on my on the web page in Web Study. I'm going to post a link to the to some sample pages. And in fact, right now I'll show you one of those example pages. So this is one of them right here. This shows a lot of the basic markup that they go over in this chapter in the book. So you can go to this little sample page. You just go to thinkinfo.net/resources. Or if you want, instead of typing all that, just go to thinkinfo.net and click the links for resources. You'll see it under Camden County College, CSC 151, and then resources, and you'll see a bunch of sample documents you can click on. And this is, of course, one of them, the Lecture 1 sample. When you're looking at this, I mean, this is obviously what's being rendered in the browser, but if you right-click and view page source, you can look at the source code and you can see how I rendered that. One thing I want you to notice, and the textbook is going to talk about this, you've got one example is strong, but then I can do the same thing with B for bold. I'll show you an example. So if I come back to this page here, I'm going to put B something, but then I'm going to also do this. I'm going to do strong something. They both do the same thing. They both give me a bold word, but one is considered logical markup, which is strong. Strong is logical, and B is physical. Make sure you understand the difference between physical and logical. So a physical markup is basically just telling the browser make this bold, and that's it. Where a logical markup is not only telling the browser to make something bold, but it tells you that this is something that's more important than the rest of the text that surrounds it. Likewise, emphasis. So I can also use the I tag to make something italicized, or I can use the EM tag. They both effectively do the same thing, but one is simply, so the I tag is physical markup, it just says make it italics, where the EM is logical markup, which means make this italicized because there's something about it that we're emphasizing. So it's important. What I would prefer to see in your projects is this the logical markup. We're not going to worry in the first couple weeks of this class. We're not going to worry too much about the about what the page looks like. So, for example, I'm going to have you write a resume, and when you write that resume, it's going to look a lot like this. It's going to be very basic. It's going to have somebody's name. It's going to have some experience, some lists. But what I'm really worried about is that data structure. I want the resume to reflect the data structure. I don't want it to look nice. I want it to have good structure to it. And likewise, when you look at my code here, notice that take a look at that structure. You can see, and also not only the structure, but also how I indented it, and that also shows that structure. I want your indenting to kind of look like that as well, to show that indenting, because A, it's easier to read, and B, it helps show that the markup, and it also helps you understand the structure of your data.